Israeli tanks on maneuvers in the Negev desert only a few weeks ago. The exercises were the biggest to be held in Israel since the end of last year's Middle East war, and they took place against a background of renewed warnings that real fighting between Israel and the Arabs could break out again at any moment. Official hopes for a permanent peace settlement are lower than at any time since the artillery duels between Israel and Syria earlier this year. The Golan Heights in May. This is how the Syrian and Israeli armies battled it out until the fighting stopped 3 months ago. Golan was the scene of some of the bitterest fighting of the October War, and it took America's Secretary of State, Dr. Henry Kissinger, a month of tough talking with both parties before reaching a compromise plan for the disengagement of forces here. The Syrians were jubilant when they were able to raise their flag once again over Kuneitra, the former capital of Golan, which had been occupied by the Israelis since 1967. Syria's President Assad was at the ceremony to mark the return of the town. The withdrawal from Kuneitra was the absolute minimum Israeli concession the Syrians were prepared to accept before agreeing to cease fire. But their ultimate objective is still the return of all the land captured in the '67 war, if not by diplomacy, then by force. The disengagement agreement was intended only as a first step towards a peace conference in Geneva, which would establish a new permanent relationship between Israel and her Arab neighbors. To get the parties to the conference table would have been a major diplomatic achievement and would have meant maintaining the diplomatic momentum after Dr. Kissinger's initial tour de force. Predictably, that hasn't happened, and now both Israel and Syria are becoming more convinced that neither is seriously interested in making the territorial concessions necessary for a lasting peace. In 1967, many Palestinians fled from the West Bank into Jordan, some becoming refugees for a second time. Deserted refugee camps like this one near Jericho bear witness to that exodus. Israel's often been tough with those who've actively opposed her occupation, stamping on any guerrilla activity.